Some of you may remember the small clamps I made last year, and some of you even showed an interest in buying them. Since then, I've thought about ways how I could mass produce them myself. So in this video, I'm seeing how efficiently I can make 200 of them using a variety of jigs, and hopefully with even more accuracy than the original ones. One thing I've done to give me a head start is to get the bodies laser cut, even though there's still plenty of work and processes to finish the clamps. And unfortunately, there was a hiccup between the laser cutter software and the software I used to make the file, and this resulted in a clamp body without the corners radiused. I made a simple jig to hold the clamp body while I grind the corners off on the belt grinder. The jig is just a clamp body with a piece of round bar and a piece of flat bar welded to it. I've set the height of the table, and now I need to set a fence that's positioned flush with the grinding belt. The jig will ride against the fence, allowing the belt to take off the corners of the clamp bodies, and that will follow the profile of the jig. That was in real time, so it doesn't take too long and much faster than marking each one and then grinding to the line. Even though you may never have to do this exact thing, it could still be a useful method in a different project. Hopefully this video will have lots of tips like this that will help you in your own setups in your own workshop. Also, there may be better ways than I've thought of throughout this video, and I'd love to hear those ideas in the comments. That's the corners rounded. Next I need to take off all the rough edges, and there's no easy way to do this. I'll use the belt grinder again, put an audio book on and just get into it. I'm using a flexible 240 grit belt, which worked out great. It doesn't dig in anywhere and you can't go too far wrong. They weren't difficult to do, but they did take quite a while. Next I'll drill and tap a hole in each clamp for the screw to fit into. My vice jaws aren't tall enough to properly support the clamp, so I quickly made these taller jaws from aluminium. I'll add a stop to make the process repeatable, and I'll use these cobalt drill bits which work very well. They don't need a pilot hole and they stay straight without wandering off centre. It's an easy task to drill these, just lots of them, pretty much like all the processes in making these clamps, but luckily I have plenty of patience. Before I thread them, I'll quickly countersink all the holes first. I've changed the chuck for one with a key, as the keyless one I was using could loosen when I reversed the tap out. I've set the machine to the lowest speed, so I'll add plenty of cutting oil and start cutting the threads. This run of 200 clamps have been a lot of work, and I'm not sure I'll make them again. It's a design I'm really happy with. They're all handmade and all steel, and I reckon they're a pretty cool and unique looking item. If you're interested, click the link in the description and you'll be able to grab one for yourself if they're still available. And as always, thanks for your support. The clamp bodies are almost there. They just need my logo stamped in and then I can paint them. On the original ones I used this setup, but because I have so many clamps to stamp and the disposable oxygen bottles are so expensive and they only last a few minutes each, I'll try using my forge instead. I'll make a shelf with a brick and just place one corner of the clamps into the forge. I can fit 3 across, and after I've stamped one, I'll replace it with another cold one and go to the next one, and that way I should have a continuous process. This worked out really well and didn't take too long at all, and the touch mark I made a couple of years ago is still going great after heaps of use. Next, I'll degrease the clamps in batches before painting them. I'm placing them in a container of turps and then placing that into the water in an ultrasonic cleaner just for a couple of minutes, and that will lift any grease and debris, especially out of the threads. I haven't shown it, and I'm not even sure if it was necessary, but I did dunk each clamp in acetone before laying them out ready to paint. This is the paint I'll be using. It's very good quality. It takes 16 hours to dry. I'll paint the backs for now, and then I'll leave them overnight. I'll then flip them over and paint the fronts. I'm spraying them from all 4 sides so they'll get plenty of paint on, and the sides will get hit again when I paint the fronts. Next, I need to start working on the screws, and for those I'm using stainless steel bolts just like the original ones. The first thing I'll do is turn a tenon on the one end for a clamp pad to swivel on. I've made this holder to help quickly mount the screw onto the lathe. It has a shoulder that sits against the jaws of the chuck, and that keeps both the holder and the screw in the same position every time. I can turn the length of the tenon by watching the DRO, but with 200 clamps to make, that will be slow and tedious, so I've made a simple stop. I'll bolt it to the carriage, and then the other end will stop against the head of the lathe. There's probably better ways to do this, but it'll work, and it was easy enough to make. It can then be adjusted with the compound, and I also drilled and tapped a hole in the one end to extend the reach and to make it adjustable with a bolt for any future projects. It would need a locking nut on there, but you get the idea. That makes it super easy to stop quickly and accurately, or accurate enough for this project anyway. For the x-axis, I'm just using the DRO as I'm only making one pass to get to the final diameter, so that's easy enough to set. When I finish the cut, I come straight back out towards me and I don't change the y-axis at all. Next, I need to drill a hole in the end of the bolt, so I slide the tailstock up until it touches the carriage. I lock that down, and then I drill a hole using the dials on the tailstock. That's the full process of machining the end of the screw, and it takes about 45 seconds from screwing it into the holder to screwing it out again. Next, I need to drill a hole all the way through the head of each bolt for a brass handle to fit through. And to hold the bolt, I've made this little V block. It's got a V running through the middle and a shelf to sit the bolt on and keep it upright. And to drill the holes, I've got this set up. I've got a couple of parallels in my vise and a 1, 2, 3 block clamped down, and that acts as a stop. And the block itself is slightly shorter on both ends than what the screw is. So when I put that on the parallels, push it up against the 1, 2, 3 block, when I tighten the vise down, it clamps both ends of the screw, and it's very quick and easy to take out, put the next one in, and it's very accurate every time. All of the drilling in stainless steel on these clamps was done with these drill bits. I reckon they're very good. I bought them myself, so it's not sponsored, but I thought I'd share it. By the time these holes were done, this one drill bit had gone through over 2.5 meters of stainless steel, and it was still going strong. And for comparison, this was my setup on the original ones. I had to thread a nut on the whole way, grab a couple of wrenches, and then level the bolts up by eye. And I also ended up with a few wonky holes on those ones. So you can see how tedious this would have been to drill 200 of them this way, and how much better the new method is. Next, I need to make the swivel pads to go on the end of the screws, and on the original clamps I did these from mild steel. Instead, I'm going to use stainless steel so I don't have to worry about them rusting. The first thing I'll do is drill a hole as deep as I can to make a tube. This will let me make a handful of parts, and then I'll drill further into the bar again, make more parts, and then so on. The jigs I've used so far I've pretty much figured out for myself, but the next jig I'll use I've taken from Joe Pieczynski. It's just a block with an adjustable arm and an adjustable rod. The block bolts into my tool post with a threaded hole that was already there. So what it is a stop, and that's so I can quickly and repeatedly get the same thickness piece every time. And because it's attached to the carriage, the end of the stop stays the same distance away from the parting tool. And I've got that set so it touches at the back of the tube, and I'll have the lathe running when I use it. I'll hold on to the stop, and as soon as I feel any vibration when it touches, I'll advance the cutter in. That will start the cut, and it also moves the stop out of the way. If you haven't seen Joe's channel, then you really should check it out. It's full of useful info and tips. I've learnt heaps, and he's also a great teacher. When the parting tool is a few millimeters deep, I knock the edges off both sides of the cut with a file. I still need to drill a recess into the part. I could have done that with the lathe, but I reckon it would have slowed the whole process down, so I'll do that separately afterwards. Even though these parts look simple, I found them to be the most tedious task on the whole project, but I kept going at it and got them done. They were left with this thin wall around the hole, a bit of a pain, but they did break off easy enough. To hold the pads while drilling in the recess, I made this block. This one corner has been machine free. It's also slightly wider than the rest of the block and will close up onto the pad when tightened in the vise. I've set a depth stop on the quill to keep them all consistent. To keep the pad on, the end of the screw needs flaring out, and to help with that I make a cut across it. I've done that on the bandsaw using this simple block with a through hole and a finger hold, and on the original ones I did this with a hacksaw. That was easy enough to cut, but it was a pain to clamp each screw. I didn't have the finger hold there when first trying the block out, and that simple change made a huge difference and it gave me a lot more control. That's the screws and pads finished, and I clean them off camera in the ultrasonic cleaner again. Next I'll make the handles, and they'll be made from 3.2mm brass rod. I only have enough to do about half the clamps for now, but the rest of it's on its way. And this simple setup worked very well for cutting them. It only took minutes to cut them all. The ends need a quick cleanup, which I did with the drill and the belt grinder. Next, I need to pinch the end of the handle so they can't come off, and I'll do that on the fly press. I've got a round top die and bottom die, and I've also got a stop, which is a nail in the end of a piece of wood that's clamped down in the correct position, and that keeps it repeatable and consistent. I'll pinch the one end first on all of the pieces, and then I'll thread them through the screws and pinch the other end. While pinching the first end, the stops slightly move, so they're not as consistent as I'd hoped. I've added more clamps to secure the stop for now, but if I ever make more clamps again, I'll work out a better solution. On the original ones, I peened each end with a hammer, which worked out fine, but for 200 clamps that would have taken forever. The last step is to fit the screw, put the swivel pad on and lock it in place. I've made another tool to do that on the fly press. I milled a slot in a piece of round bar to clear the clamp and glued a ball bearing on the end to flare out the end of the screw. This was a repeatable process with the depth stop set on the top of the fly press, and much faster than how I originally did this using a clamp. I reckon they turned out fantastic, and I reckon I did a pretty good job of them, although they aren't 100% perfect and each one is unique as they are handmade. The video is a bit different to usual, as I've already made a video of the clamps, but hopefully you found it interesting how I've improved the methods and processes. Let me know of any ways I could improve them further. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, please like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.